What's going on, sports fans? JD here at JD Sports Talk, and today I have the Entertainah Talking Sports back here with us to react to the Louis Riddick video that went viral yesterday. Tana, how are you today?
Hey, man, it's a pleasure coming back on the channel. Like I was telling you before we even started this, anytime you want to come on mine, I come on yours. You want to talk Giants, looking forward to it. Been a great sport of mine for a long time and really looking forward to seeing the continued growth of your channel.
Thank you, man. Appreciate the kind words. And yes, we did our first video. I'll put it on the end screen if this is your first time here. I've done a lot of Knicks videos, but now we're heading into some football. So we'll kind of pivot a little bit to some Giant videos and kind of balance it out. And, there was positive feedback. Everybody enjoyed the video. So I wanted to have you back for this special one with Louis Riddick. So let's get right to it. Louis Riddick went and said some pretty strong words yesterday on ESPN. And what we're going to do is we're going to just play the clip. And then I'll get Tana's reaction afterwards, and we'll break it down. So I am going to play the video for you guys, and here we go.
Right now, Daniel Jones' success and or failure will be, although it's on him because ultimately you're responsible for your own performance, it will also be an indictment on the entire team building operation in New York if he does fail, because it's not going to be just on him. The offensive line has been mismanaged in epic proportions. To epic proportions. They had their pick of every single offensive tackle in the draft last year, and they picked Andrew Thomas, who was by far the worst one. The worst. The worst. That is on personnel. That is on coaching and development and utilization. That is something that John Mara's going to have to take a hard look at overall. It's not just Daniel Jones, but what has happened around him. And that is something that is going to take a while to play itself out this year. And I will tell you this, look, I know John Mara said he doesn't want to give them a win or else type of ultimatum this year. But he also said at the end of last year, we better be trending towards being a competitive football team because, Ryan, you've already laid it out, and Chris, you laid it out as well. This is a proud franchise that has won Super Bowls, man. They have multiple Hall of Famers. They play in the biggest media market in the country. You aren't supposed to be losing double-digit games over and over and over and over again and looking like you're going the wrong direction. This is a big, big, big time year for this football team, not just Daniel Jones, but this entire football operation. And deservedly so.
All right. So some pretty strong words there, Tata. Some things he mentioned about the front office, the developmental, the coaching, the Andrew Thomas, our offensive line, and calling him, the worst. What's your initial reactions to some of these, to this clip from Louis Riddick, and anything else that you may want to add?
Well, I mean, like we know what Louis Riddick, I think most Giant fans agree that he wanted the Giants job, right? And obviously wanted the Giants job. He applied for it, didn't get it. And I think there's times where he rubs Giants fans the wrong way because sometimes it seems like he goes above and beyond. With his initial thought process, I'm actually in complete agreement with what he initially has to say about Daniel Jones. And if Daniel Jones fails, yes, obviously, he's going to be given the brunt of the responsibility. But at the same time, it's going to be an indictment on the organization for not setting up Daniel Jones for success. Much like the Jets with Sam Darnold, right? Sam Darnold was set up to fail up to this point in Daniel Jones's career. If we're being honest, he's been set up to fail. We all know he didn't have the necessary weapons, especially when Barker went down last year. And the offensive line, to his point, has been a disaster. Not just Gettleman was here, long before he got here. The Giants' offensive line has been piss poor for 10 straight years for this team. And it's why, since I've been on my channel, that's all I talk about is the hog mollies. That's what the New York Giants need to fix. So I'm in complete agreement there, where I think he goes off the rails, and I think he's a little bit over the top in his criticism. I don't know how, and the way in which he said it. Now, if he would have worded it in a way, listen, last year they drafted Andrew Thomas, and in his rookie season, he struggled, and he was the worst of the four, even though I could certainly make an argument that he was third out of fourth, and he certainly wasn't by far the worst. When you look at the PFF numbers, Jedrick Wills actually had a worse grade than that of Andrew Thomas. Andrew Thomas was slightly above him. I think he went above and beyond. I think it's clickbait when it comes to the Andrew Thomas portion of it. Not to mention the limitations that Andrew Thomas had last year. You factor in, you got a new second-year quarterback in a brand new scheme. Look at the other quarterbacks. Mayfield was in a new scheme, but it was his third year in the league. Tom Brady certainly helps out there with Jedrick Wills playing. Tristan Wirfs playing on the right side. So you have to factor everything else in. The Giants had a completely new offensive line, and it was probably the worst outside of maybe Becton, who didn't have an ideal circumstance either with the New York Jets, but it was probably the worst situation for him to step into. We heard after the fact he had a foot injury the entire year. He had a changing of an offensive line coach, and we saw the progression that Andrew Thomas made in the second half. So I just think he's not factoring any of that in with his individual criticism of saying he's by far the worst tackle. Would I be shocked this year if Andrew Thomas takes a monumental leap and is in the discussion with being the best tackle? No, I wouldn't. It's going to be hard to top Wirfs because you got Brady, but I think Andrew Thomas is going to be just fine. So from that standpoint of the video, I think he's completely off base. His overall point, yeah, I think me, you, and every New York Giants fans agrees with him there that the offensive line has been a complete disaster over the last 10 years with Gettleman and long before Gettleman.
Right. Yeah. And, as you mentioned, I think that, a lot of it was he was interested in the job. There were plenty of times that, he was mentioned throughout the years. He's been linked to the Giants, not plenty of years off seasons whenever the Giants had some pressure or whenever there was rumors that the Giants may make front office changes. He interviewed with the Giants. And I think, some of this, as you can see in the energy, in his aggressiveness, a lot of it is, I don't want to say bitterness, but, guy's passionate and he wanted this opportunity. And he's on Twitter. He's a young guy, so he sees what's going around. A lot of fans actually wanted Louis Riddick. Were in favor of him being the next Giants GM. So I'm pretty sure he's aware of all those things. And sometimes during the moment, I think a lot of that was maybe he was delivering a subtle message to John Mara of whenever, remember when I was in that meeting with you, this is what I said would be my plan. And he's probably adding more pressure on the front office in terms of saying, this will be an indictment on them. This is, he mentioned coaching, utilization. He mentioned developmental. He's going right at the new guys that John Mara brought in, with Dave Gettleman and Joe Judge and the whole operation. Those were his words in terms of the whole operation. And, I wanted to I have there on the screen, little background check on Louis Riddick, real quick, where had he been the GM, it looks like, there was an article there in 2019 in the New York Post where it says Giants GM Riddick, Daniel Jones is not the QB I've drafted. Now, in that article, there is specifics on what he says from his quotes, what he would have done if he had been the GM. And, some of it was, he said, quote, as far as quarterback is concerned, I would have made it a priority to draft a quarterback. I just wouldn't have drafted this one. Everyone knows how I feel about Dwayne Haskins. I would have went that route with it. A few other notables. He said that he would have given the contract to Landon Collins. He would have re-signed Landon Collins. Another quote from him here. I would have drafted Saquon Barkley. I would have made sure Odell has that relationship. I could have lived with Eli Manning for another year. I understand why they did that. I wouldn't have drafted the quarterback that they drafted. He gave an endorsement to Pat Shurmur. He said he would have not traded Odell Beckham. And yeah, Landon Collins, Odell Beckham, would have went Haskins, was okay with Eli for another year, endorsed Pat Shurmur. Tana, a lot of it, a lot of those decisions would have involved additional money to the cap. Who knows what the team would look like today? And, as we were talking before we started, recording, at the very least, if all things fail with the Dave Gettleman tenure going into next season and things don't work out, we do have the Chicago Bears pick. We do have some draft capital. Even currently, I do believe that we have some talented young players here. In the secondary, you can make a case that even if things fail, the Giants wouldn't be in such a terrible position in terms of making a quick turnaround, as they'll have additional high draft picks, you would think, if things don't go right with them and the Bears. to kind of pivot and make a quick change. What are your thoughts on Riddick's background? And hey, he was criticizing us, but who knows if it would have been better with him.
Yeah, I mean, here's what I'll say about Riddick, man. Even if it wouldn't have been better with him, it's fair for him to critique what Dave Gettleman has done, just like it would have been fair if Gettleman didn't get the job to critique what Riddick may have done if it didn't work out with Riddick, even though Gettleman may have not worked with Gettleman either. So if somebody wants to bring up that point, I get it. But to your point about Riddick, I mean, it would have been a failure, if we're being honest. He would have taken Barkley just like Gettleman did, which was understandable. I would have preferred a trade down, if I'm being honest, on draft night. It wasn't on YouTube when that happened. I love Saquon Barkley. I just didn't think that it fit the timeline of the team. They didn't have the offensive line situated to be taking a running back second overall. I got that they were trying to get Eli another ring and all that. He said that he would have drafted Dwayne Haskins. We all already know that take. And if you think Haskins would have been any better with the Giants, you're out of your mind. The Giants' offensive line is even worse than the Washington offensive line. He was a disaster there. Maybe you want to argue maybe he could have fit in the Shermer offense. I personally think Daniel Jones is a better fit in the Shermer offense than Dwayne Haskins ever would have been. So I honestly don't think he would have been right in that decision. And the Giants probably would have been in an even worse position than Washington was when it came to drafting Haskins, because you would have drafted him earlier. You would have had to give him more money. It would have been a stronger commitment, and they absolutely would have at least seen it 2 years through. And he may still even be the quarterback with the New York Giants had they drafted him 6th overall. The fact that Washington drafted 15th overall, it's not nearly the financial commitment. They brought in a new coach. They felt like they could move on quicker, and obviously Haskins wasn't showing a lot of progression. So we would have been a disaster with him, without him, whatever. And I always say it, it's easy to be a Monday morning GM. Like, for instance, the Saquon Barkley pick, everybody that bashes it, rightfully so. I understand the criticism. Most of those people were taking Rosen or Darnold. That's just the fact of the matter. That's just the truth of it. And that would have been an even bigger disaster. So it's always easy to criticize. Gettleman was in a really tough spot, not defending Gettleman. It was a mistake in 2018 not to rebuild. You could definitely argue that some of it was Mara influence. We move on, whatever. And then the other point I want to bring up about this, he's critiquing the offensive line. Like I said, rightfully so. And this is a guy that's hammering home, you failed with the offensive lineman, you took the wrong offensive tackle, which is yet to be determined. He would not have taken an offensive tackle in the 2020 draft. He is on record of saying, I would have fallen out of my chair if the New York Giants did not draft Isaiah Simmons. So this is a guy diagnosing that the offensive line is a massive problem for the New York Giants. Yet, in arguably the richest tackle draft class in the last 20 years, he would have bypassed the tackle and taken a linebacker. So to me, for him to come out and say that, well, he is right. He also sounds a bit hypocritical, being that he said if he was the Giants GM in that year with all those great tackle prospects, he would have taken a linebacker, especially after the New York Giants had already signed Blake Martinez, who proved to be a good free agent acquisition at the position.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, good point about Isaiah Simmons. As we all know, Isaiah Simmons has had a slow start to his career, did not start his rookie year. The Cardinals have been trying to figure out his position. It looks like he's projected to start this season, but the jury's still out on him. And I guess if we evaluate his report card so far with Dwayne Haskins, Landon Collins, who has struggled.
I didn't even get into that. Yeah. I'll talk about that real quick. I forgot about the Collins and the Beckham thing. The Beckham thing, everybody's going to have their own opinion. There's definitely Giants fans that are pro Beckham and we should have never traded him. Whatever. I guess we're still diagnosing who won the trade. I personally think the Giants won it. Doesn't matter. I'm not even going to talk much about Beckham. The Landon Collins thing is indisputable. It would have been a horrible move for the New York Giants to retain Landon Collins. Maybe you can make an argument that they should have franchise tagged him for a year, but regardless, he was not going to be here long term. The New York Giants made the right decision. Dave Gettleman made the right decision there in not extending Landon Collins on a multi-year contract. He got a record-breaking deal. Washington was even in talks of potentially cutting him going into this season to try to save some money. He was a good in-the-box safety, couldn't cover, was not worth record-breaking money. The only argument that I could see somebody bringing up outside of the franchise tag is maybe you could have tried to trade him from within season, but from Dave Gettleman's perspective, you're midway through the season. You have a young safety that is 2 years removed from being Defensive Player of the Year runner-up. And maybe he wanted to evaluate him for the rest of the year before he came to that decision, and he still got a comp pick for him anyway. So maybe you could have got a late second-round pick instead of a late third-round pick, but at the end of the day, I think it was understandable for Dave Gettleman to want to see another 8 games of Landon Collins, being that a player of that magnitude, as young as he was, to see whether or not he was going to be in the long-term plans of this football team.
Absolutely, and great points there in some of the decisions that Riddick would have made with the New York Giants. And as you mentioned, Landon Collins has not worked out. We would have had to deal with that in terms of cap space. And then you're talking about Dwayne Haskins. Who knows if his trajectory would have been the same with the Giants. But hey, when you're not it, you're not it. And let's see, like a player like Jameis Winston. Let's see if he turns it around in another situation. So you do have some of those examples, but more than likely, if a quarterback, you see Trubisky, you see a lot of these examples where, if you just don't work out, I understand the argument of, well, maybe if you would have been in a different organization under a different structure, hey, Riddick would have not invested in the offensive line. So maybe Dwayne Haskins dealing with similar issues that Daniel Jones is currently dealing with. So and speaking of Andrew Thomas, he called him the worst tackle. I have in front of here a comparison to Lane Johnson, who was also the fourth overall pick. And as you guys can see in front of you, Lane Johnson has turned out to be a pretty good player for the Philadelphia Eagles. He is an All-Pro. He's been to multiple Pro Bowls. And as you guys can see there, that was the numbers on their rookie year. Also want to point out, Tana, in addition to the numbers you guys see in front of you, in terms of how similar they are, Andrew Thomas had the highest PFF score going into the draft in terms of tackles. Andrew Thomas, by many experts, was evaluated as the quote-unquote safest pick. Me personally, I liked it Beckham, Mekhi Becton, just because of athleticism, size, 6'7", 360-something pounds. I know that he was a little raw, and at 4, a lot of people view him as sort of a reach. But, I just liked his athleticism. I was fine with the Thomas pick. I definitely understood what they were thinking there. But in my opinion, to call a guy that many evaluators saw him as a safe pick, he is picked this year on a PFF article as one of the players that they project will have a breakout year, Tana. So people are calling him a breakout candidate in year 2, right? Second half of the season last year, from week 8 on, he jumped 20 points on his PFF score from 45 to 63.5 in terms of pass blocking. In terms of just pass protection. We saw technique and we saw some improvements once Joe Judge made some adjustments with the coaching. I just thought it was a reach for him to go that far. I think the data supports it, the evidence supports it. What are your thoughts on Andrew Thomas in year 2, and what are your thoughts on the criticism that Louis Riddick gave him?
The Lane Johnson thing is startling. You showed me those stats before the video, and it's literally identical in terms of sacks, in terms of hits, in everything. The numbers are literally identical outside of the snap count, which was 621 to 615, and they were both identical picks in terms of 4th overall. So that was a good find by you, and I think that's really interesting. In terms of the player comparison, and it just goes to show you that you can't judge it. You can't judge a player just based off their first year. You also have to take into account all the variables, like kind of what I said earlier, the injury that he was dealing with, all the, you're talking about Nick Gates, who had never played center before at the start of the year. You're talking about a rookie right tackle on the other side. You're talking about shifting the guards throughout the year. He was dealing with Will Hernandez at the beginning, then Shane Lemieux. They were playing musical chairs with the offensive line all year. That's a lot to ask for a rookie left tackle. So you have to take all of this into account, not to mention a quarterback. A quarterback has a lot to do with how an offensive line overall performs with his pre-snap reads, getting adjusted to the scheme. Who would you rather have? Playing on the right side with Tom Brady or playing with Daniel Jones in a brand new scheme? Let's be real here. Let's be fair in our criticisms about Andrew Thomas. He was way overboard with it. And let's see what Andrew Thomas could do going into year 2. I think he's going to have a breakout year. Much like several people are saying, I'm very confident in Andrew Thomas. And like you said, I was actually not – I would have understood the Becton pick. I thought it was a boom or bust pick. Right. The thing I worry about Becton long-term, I'm with you on terms of the athletic ability, the size, the upside. I worry about the injuries. The guy's had weight problems all throughout college. He's now had weight problems in the NFL. He had some injury scares in his rookie year. So I worry about that with him. It's why I thought it was a little bit too early to take a guy like that. I understood the Thomas pick. I would have been good with Wills. I would have been good with Wirfs. I just knew that we needed a tackle, and all 4 of them were very talented prospects.
Right, and they evaluated Thomas as the most likely ready to play left tackle. Like with people, when it was the evaluations of Wirfs, it was more of, is he a left tackle year 1? With Becton, it was what you mentioned. It was, at that high, weight problems, injury concerns. Is he too raw to start year one? So everyone had their ups and downs, pros and cons. So again, I understand the pick. And as you mentioned, that is definitely my number one concerns with Becton. He missed a few games last season. He's already had a few nicks in Jets training camp this year already with some, lingering stuff. So you don't like to see that as he starts year two of his career. It may be something that he deals with, and let's give Thomas a fair chance. He's had a solid camp, Tana. We haven't heard much from, what they say, from offensive linemen or even secondary players. When you don't see them on the screen or you don't hear about them, they're doing something good.
I hate when I call offensive linemen's names when I'm doing the play-by-play.
All right, so thank you guys for joining us. Tana, as always, thank you very much for joining. Please make sure you guys subscribe to the Entertainah Talking Sports. He is going to stream every single Giants game. Is that correct, Tana?
Yeah, unless I'm going to it. But yeah, every game that I'm not going to this year, which should be pretty much every game outside of one or two.
So make sure you guys tune in to the Entertainah Talking Sports, streaming every game. And we all can't wait for continued Giants content. Thank you for joining us, guys. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider. And if you do, make sure you hit the notification bell so that you are notified every time that I drop a video. And I'll see you guys around the next video.